If you guys enjoy what I do, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free and easy to do. Before we get started with today's video, I have an announcement to make. After years of telling other people's stories, I finally released one of my own. My novel Eternal Reign is available now in both ebook and paperback format for those of you who are like me and prefer to collect physical media. You can grab a copy right now on Amazon through the link in the description of this video. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. Ul'dah is the home of the Colosseum and the Gladiators Guild, where warriors train to fight day in and day out in hopes of winning enough gil to be able to buy anything, even a spot in the syndicate. While joining the criminal leaders of Ul'dah may not be high on the Warrior of Light's bucket list, training with some of the best fighters and getting to beat them is something he's more than interested in doing. Of course, before you can join, Mila, the leader of the guild who has the title of the First Sword, has to approve of you. She looks you over and you seem strong enough, but of course you have to prove that you are, and you do that by taking a list of small creatures nearby and slaughtering them with your sword. I'll never understand why these people think it's a real test of strength to be able to cut down a squirrel with a saber, but you want to join and that's your first task, so it's got to be done. Since you've proven that the likes of squirrels and ladybugs are no match for your combat skills, Mila sent you to the quicksand because Momodai is having problems with a gang of lamenting marauders harassing people outside of her tavern. The fact that these men are harassing regular folks means they're cowards, and you may not even have to draw your sword if you can intimidate them enough. Simply taunting the men outside makes them leave their victims alone, but the guy inside of the tavern is made of sterner stuff, and he decides to kill you for bothering him. However, a man who was drinking at the table nearby steps in. At first, the marauder is talking tough to him, until he notices the very unique sword on the man's waist. Apparently, the sword is extremely rare and carried by the man with the title of Sword of Nald. Whatever that title means, it must be serious, because the marauder not only leaves, but he apologizes first. The guy with the strange sword commends you on your bravery, but he thinks you were a little bit stupid for confronting the guy, but that's only because he hasn't seen you fight. The man's name is Aldis, and he says that he would buy you a drink, but he's broke, so he can't. Don't know why he even brought it up then if he didn't have any money, but you know. He claims that he used to be a gladiator, but now he just wanders around doing stuff. He would talk to you more, but he has a beautiful woman waiting for him in his room, but he's got more important things to do than stand there with you. When he leaves, Momodai is shocked that Aldis is even still alive, a fact that she wants you to keep from Mila because apparently the two of them have history, and it's not the good kind. You barely talk anyway, so keeping secrets is your strongest ability. When you get back to the guild, Mila has already heard about how you made the marauders run away, and she's proud of you, but there's been reports of some raiders attacking merchants near Scorpion's Crossing, and it's probably the same men who you just ran off, so you head to the crossing to hunt them down again. They robbed a merchant, but they haven't gotten far, so you catch up, put them down, and get the merchant's stuff back. Since that was everything he owned, he's really grateful that you got it all back for him. And of course, Mila is happy that you completed the job, which is a part of your training, because while these criminals were weak, the next ones you deal with might not be, so you have to be ready. The next battle comes quickly because Mila hears word of a few violent murders in the area. The people were killed with spears, which makes her think that the culprits might be lancers. While the attacks are dangerous to the city, it's only a matter of time before a gladiator gets attacked too. A part of the lancers group was hanging around Stone's Throw, and they're likely the people you're after, so Mila sent you to check. The lancers are attacking a gladiator when you get there, and after you deal with them, the man says that the people were looking for a guy named Aldis. Even though he's clearly not Aldis, they still tried to kill him too. When you get back to Mila and tell her about the Lancers, she's confused about why the Duskwights would be coming all the way from the Black Shroud. But before you can tell her about Aldis, Bruce comes running in screaming about a lot of Lancers hiding out in the tunnels near Blackbrush Station. She tells you to go with him to deal with them since you were already working on that problem anyway. But she probably should have sent more than just the two of you since there are quite a few Lancers, but the two of you managed to handle it. When you finally get back and tell Mila about Aldis, she can't even believe he's still alive. But there's still more work to do, so there's no time to dwell on that now. A request came from both the Immortal Flames and the Brass Blades for some help keeping an outpost at Camp Drybone secure. The Amonja have been raiding caravans in the area, and even though they've always been at war with the people, these attacks are too frequent to ignore. She's already sent a few men out there, and she wants you to go and join them. Your assistance comes at the right time, and you finish off the last of the Amonja before they can kill anyone else. One of the other gladiators sticks around to help the merchant so you can go back and report to Mila. When you make it back, Aldis actually shows up, catching Mila completely off guard. She recovers fast and demands to know where he's been for all these years. She thought he was dead, and him just showing up after having dishonored the guild makes her threaten to stab him. Her emotions are a little bit all over the place, which is apparently exactly how Aldis remembers her. He wants you to meet him at the quicksand because he wants some company, and when you show up, which he didn't expect, he seems like he really did just want someone to talk to, and he starts by complimenting you on your swordsmanship and your seeming strength of character. As for that very unique sword of his, the thing is called Frenzy, and the reason it's so unique is it was made by a very skilled blacksmith named Geralt. He made 2 identical swords for 2 champions of the Colosseum. Aldis starts to tell you something about the man who has the sword's twin, but robed assassins burst in with the sole purpose of removing Aldis's head, but since he's attached to it, he decides to take theirs, and you go to back him up. Even though you're outnumbered, the 2 of you come out on top. Aldis knows who sent the men, although he didn't think he'd send mercenaries after him in broad daylight in a crowded tavern. He would continue the conversation, but the attack ruined the mood, so he decides to pick up your meeting another time. While you were fighting in the quicksand, another member of the guild got attacked and seriously injured by what Mila thinks is some more bounty hunters. It may even be a trap to lure out Aldis, but you still have to go and help. He called and said he was taking shelter at the Coffer and Coffin, so Mila wants you to take him a potion to help him make it back to the city. You find him and he's in bad shape, but the potion does help, which makes me really want to know what's in those things. The gladiator can't really tell you much because the attack happened so fast. He doesn't even know why they left him alive, but he knows that somebody had to have seen something. A guy at the station saw a man in a purple robe talking on a link pearl, saying something about the wrong man in the Silver Bazaar. After you check the spot where the man got attacked, you find a strange ring that you take to Wymond, who's in the business of knowing pretty much everything about everything, and he knows what the ring is. It's not something you should be flashing around. The ring is a symbol of the Alacran, a criminal organization that's grown pretty large pretty fast in Ul'dah. They have connections to pretty much every organization in the city, and they're so bad that Wymond doesn't want any part in whatever you all have gotten yourselves into. Mila finds it hard to believe that the Alacran are behind the attack, but one of her people came back saying a group of bandits are heading toward the Silver Bazaar, looking for a man with a large bounty on his head. The people who live at the bazaar will be in real danger if the group of bandits starts going through their property hunting their target, and there aren't enough brass blades in the area to keep them safe, so Mila's gonna lead some gladiators to help defend the place. Aldis overheard her, something he shouldn't have been able to do since Mila told him to never come back to the guild, but he ignored her because he doesn't want her dragging her men off to fight an enemy that she doesn't know anything about, especially since it really is the Alacran, and they're more dangerous than Mila is giving them credit for. Aldis wants to deal with them alone since he's the one they're actually looking for. They've been trying to kill him since he came back to Thanalan. Mila doesn't care about any of what he's saying. He left her without a word 7 years ago, so the fact that he just walked back in and thought she'd take his advice just makes the woman mad. Since he can't talk her out of going, he just leaves, and you all head to the Silver Bazaar. The Alacran are there in force, but Mila brought more than a handful of people of her own, and the battle flows in your favor. Eventually you push the majority of the Alacran back, and Mila celebrates the victory until the leader of the group shows up and she recognizes the man. Some of her soldiers attack him before Mila can stop them, and they're killed by his guard Zana, who is clearly a bit stronger than the average members of the organization. Instead of continuing the fight, they leave, but you notice the leader is carrying the twin of Aldis' sword as you all carry your wounded away. When you get back to the guild hall, Aldis tells Mila that the reason he had tried to stop her from going was because he didn't want her to know that Leavold, their old friend, had taken over the Alacran. In the past, Aldis and Leavold had dominated in the Colosseum as the twin swords of Narthal. They were so good that even Rauban had applauded their skills, although I doubt they could have fought him. But now Leavold not only took over the Alacran, but turned the group into the most feared criminal organization in Thanalan, and that's why Aldis came back, to deal with his old friend. Mila can't believe the man turned criminal, but his desire to kill Aldis is enough proof to show that he really has broken bad. But Aldis promises to find him and deal with him so Mila won't have to. Mila apologizes to you for putting you into a battle that none of you were ready for. The only reason things hadn't turned out really bad is because Leavold didn't join in the fighting. If he had, a lot more men would have died. Still, she has to know why her friend went bad, so she has some people trying to track him down. One of these scouts have vanished, so Mila thinks he's either been captured or killed, and she wants you to search for him because if he's alive, then he likely won't be for long. The last report she got said the man was tracking the Alacran in western Thanalan, so that's your next stop. When you find the scout, the whole thing turns out to be a trap, but you bring the attackers down. The gladiator isn't all that badly hurt, so he sends you back to Mila to let her know what happened. The woman's glad to hear some good news for once, and after all the work you've done for the guild, you deserve some rest, after you see what Lulusu has for you. The woman has a message from Aldis. He wants you to meet him at the Lich Yard in Eastern Thanalan since Mila gets mad every time he comes to the guild. You find him standing in front of Mila's father's grave thinking about when the man had died 7 years ago and how he had been a true master of the sword. After he died, Mila had been forced to take over the guild, and he left her without any help, making the job even harder. He starts to say more, but in typical fashion, one of the members of the Alacran shows up to interrupt you. They must have put a tracker on one of you because they show up every time you're talking to the man. This time it's Zana, Leavold's guard, who shows up. Aldis would deal with her himself, but he decides to use this moment to evaluate your skills. They prove to be far greater than hers. After you put an end to the woman, Aldis sees that with your skills you could be a real help to Mila, someone she can rely on, which is the opposite of him. But he does promise to put an end to the Alacran problem. He owes it to Mila's father. You've been gone for long enough, so Aldis sends you back to the guild so Mila won't get suspicious. Not long after you get back, Mila gets some news that ticks her off. Of course, it seems like a lot of stuff makes the woman upset. However, this time she has a legit reason. Aldis has been arrested by the Brass Blades, and they claim he was plotting to kill the Sultana. She knows the claims are false because not only does Aldis not have a motive, but if he was going to kill the woman, he'd stab her, not use poison. That means the Alacran used their connections to get him arrested, since they haven't been able to deal with him in the honorable ways like sneak attacks and jumping in with a whole group of people. She didn't believe Wyman when he said the Alacran had that type of power, but there's no denying it now. So she plans on putting that man's knowledge to good use, and she sends you to see what else Wyman knows about the Alacran. The man was expecting you, of course. After Aldis went quietly with the soldiers, he knew that Mila would be sending someone to see what he knew. Although he is surprised Aldis didn't put up a fight, considering how there is no way the Alacran will let him live. Not with Leavold in charge. But you don't know anything about their history, so Wyman fills you in so you can finally stop being so clueless. Aldis and Leavold were two of the best gladiators to ever step in the arena. That much you already knew. But you didn't know how much money could be made on the fights. Apparently Aldis got greedy and set up a scheme to rig a match to make a lot of money, and the people found out about it, which got him banned from the arena. This all happened around the time Mila's dad got sick and died, which a lot of people still think the man was either killed by Aldis or killed himself because of the shame Aldis brought on the guild. True or not, those rumors only made things worse for Aldis, so he left, causing Mila to lose the two most important men in her life at the same time. As for Leavold, he tried to go solo in the arena, but he wasn't as good as Aldis, so his career was pretty much over, which led to where he is now. The story makes Aldis look bad, but having spent time with the man, the Warrior of Light doesn't exactly believe the accusations, either about the attempts on the Sultana or the fight rigging that got him expelled from the arena. But Wyman doesn't doubt what the man might have done, especially considering the type of poison they say he was caught with. The stuff is called Rauger's Bile. It's very potent stuff that only the Corpse Brigade knows how to make. He doesn't know why they'd give the stuff to Aldis, but you can go to their base in southern Thanalan and ask yourself, although I doubt they'll be willing to talk. Before you leave, Wyman tells you to let Aldis know that the two of them are even after this, and he hopes it was all worth it, whatever that means. The Corpse Brigade is not in the least bit happy to have you snooping around, and they make that known by trying to murder you, but you find the proof you need and bring it to Mila, only to find out they've sent Aldis out to be executed. But the proof you have that the Alacran bought the poison should be enough to get the charges dropped, so you race off to Highbridge before it's too late. Evidence or not, the Alacran had no plans on leaving this up to chance, so the executioner goes to kill Aldis anyway since he's been paid off. However, Mila hadn't planned on letting the execution go through either, and she came with enough gladiators to free the man, and she brought his sword. Of course, Aldis' original plan was to steal the headsman's axe and cut his way out of there. But of course, once he cuts his bonds, the executioner runs off, but the Alacran are there in force, as well as Leavold himself, which was why Aldis let himself get taken. He was trying to draw the man out. Aldis charges off to fight his former teammate while you go help Mila deal with the rest of the Alacran. Just like before, the gladiators prove to be better fighters, and Aldis defeats Leavold. The man is still mad about what happened in the arena, but not because Aldis rigged the fight. It's because he wouldn't accept losing one fight for the two of them to make a lot of money. As punishment, Leavold ruined him, making it look like he was the criminal and destroying the reputation that was so important to him, all over a little bit of money. Still, after Leavold throws himself off of the bridge instead of letting himself get arrested, it's all over. The Alacran are dealt with for the most part, and you all head back to the guild where Aldis decides not to stick around since there are more members of the organization out there, and they might want revenge for him ruining what they had. So he leaves, once again abandoning Mila, although he says some things to make her upset so she won't miss him as much, at least not right away. In Ul'dah at the Gladiators Guild, the Warrior of Light hears a bit of gossip. Apparently the Sultan's sworn elite have decided to share the secret training of the Paladins with the people. This might not seem all that special, but in the past, if you weren't a member of the Sultan Sworn who was on the path of becoming an officer, then you had no shot of learning the techniques of a paladin. So the competition for earning the training was brutal. It also forced you to swear an oath to the Ul'dah Sultanate, so you couldn't be an adventurer or even fight in the Colosseum if you decided to take the job, which is why the change in policy is such a big deal, one that the Warrior of Light is eager to take advantage of. Jinlins, the captain of the Sultan Sworn Elite, is recruiting people near the Royal Promenade, so you head there to tell him that you're interested in joining. The first thing he does is tell you that a paladin doesn't fight for himself, but for others, which means you're a paladin no matter what job you choose since you're always fighting for everyone else, making you a perfect fit for learning the techniques that the paladins have been perfecting for 600 years. Unfortunately, their numbers have been shrinking as time passed, probably because of how hard it was to become a paladin in the first place, so the Sultana has been having to get mercenaries and adventurers to defend the palace for her. Apparently this all happened because of a traitor in their ranks, but that's not your problem for now, even though it did cause them to make the changes that allowed you to have a chance to become a free paladin, one that's not bound to the Sultanate. If you don't actually suck with a sword, that is. There are some ruins to the south of Little Alamigo where they have an iron brazier. Jinlins wants you to light the fire there, kill the undead that show up, and bring in their ashes to prove that you did it. An easy enough task for someone of your skill. When you finish the mission, a big, kinda creepy looking Rogadin in plate mail reveals himself to you. He knows that you're there trying to become a paladin, and he wants you to know that learning how to use a sword and wearing paladin armor doesn't actually make you one. He's a free paladin who tells you a bunch of nonsense about breaking your shackles and such before handing you a soul crystal to take to Jinlins. He does mention that the way you use your sword reminds him of someone he used to know before he heads off. When you return to Jinlins with your prize, he congratulates you on becoming a free paladin, which is basically just a paladin adventurer. He goes to give you a soul crystal of your own, but when he finds out someone gave you one, he takes it from you and lets you know that it's impure because it was stolen from the Sultan Sworn. The man who gave it to you was the traitor Jinlins has been hunting. Jinlins had wanted to become a paladin since he had first seen his predecessor as a small child. Him and his father had got caught in a riot in the city, and they would have died if his old captain hadn't saved them. After seeing how the man fought, Jinlins had trained day and night with a sword. After years of work, he had made it into the Sultan Sworn and eventually became a paladin. Then finally he became the captain. But by then the group had lost a lot of their honor because the sword Oathkeeper had been stolen. That sword was the symbol of all things paladin, and when the traitor stole it, people lost faith in the order. If they couldn't keep the sword safe, then how could they protect the Sultana? The only way to get that honor back is to catch the traitor and get the sword. Jinlins expects you to help with that, but you'll need to be stronger first, and the best way to get stronger is to make you fight stuff, so he sends you out to Lenosha to do just that. Seeing how you fight and hearing about your growing list of good deeds makes Jinlins proud to have you in the order, and since you've proven yourself, he decides to trust you with the truth. The person who stole the Oathkeeper, the traitor Solkzagyl, is his former captain and the man who made him want to become a paladin in the first place. A few years ago, the Sultanate military and a group called the Monitarists, a group that's a part of the Syndicate who are always causing problems in Ul'dah, fought for power. The Monitarists won, and the military lost a lot of its authority. Solkzagyl was still in charge of the Sultan Sworn, but he knew that his position was in danger, so he took the Oathkeeper and left, which went against every oath he took. And Jinlins is willing to kill his former mentor if that's what it takes to restore their honor. After he's put on trial, of course. However, he was a paladin for 30 years, and fighting him won't be easy. Trying to bring him in alive will probably get one of you killed, so you need to train more to get ready for that day, which means more fighting. While you do that, Jinlins keeps hunting for his former teacher. While he was going through some information trying to find out a little bit more about his old master, he learned that at the same time the man became captain, a few high-ranking members of the Sultan Sworn died, but the records don't show how. He checked with some more sources and found that all of them had been poisoned, which makes Jinlins think that they were killed by the Death's Embrace, assassins that work for the Monitors. The group is good, and few people even believe they exist, but good or not, they shouldn't have been able to take out that many of the Sultan Sworn, not without help from the inside, that is. And the only person who had something to gain from their deaths is Solkzagyl. The Monitors wanted to get rid of all of the best Paladins so they could take over, which makes you wonder, how did Solkzagyl last for 30 years without being murdered? Unless he was the one working with the assassins. All of this makes Jinlins want to hunt the man down even more, so he decides it's time for you to undertake the trial for your armor so you'll be better equipped for the fight. For the trial, your armor is taken to 4 locations in southern Thanalan, and you have to find each piece and beat the 2 men set to guard them. Of course, it's easy for you to get, and when you make it back to Jinlins, he lets you know that he's found Solkzagyl. The man has agreed to meet with them at the Forgotten Springs to discuss the return of the sword. He wants you to keep all of this secret, because if the Monitors find out what's going on, they'll probably try to stop you. He even wants you to travel separately so you won't draw attention. Out in the desert, you find a sword stuck in the ground at the meeting spot, but you don't see any sign of Solkzagyl. When Jinlin shows up with members of the Sultan Sworn, the man says that some of his friends told him that you were working with the traitor and the Monitors, which has got to be the most ridiculous story ever. But the man not only believes them, but he plans on beating you until you confess and tell him where Solkzagyl is. You'd have to be stupid to think that your newest member of your organization is somehow involved in a takeover plot that you think has been going on for years. But Jinlins is so focused on restoring the honor of the Paladins that he's reaching for anything that he can to make that happen, no matter how ridiculous it is. And you trying to tell him that the Sultan Sworn have lied to him doesn't go over well. He's known them longer, and he trusts them more, so he sentences you to death. Since talking didn't work, you do what you do best and take them all down. Jinlins is so confused by how a new recruit beat him that he doesn't notice the member of the Sultan Sworn aiming a bow at him. Fortunately, Solkzagyl steps in and saves the man's life, causing the attacker to run off. The whole event was a setup by the Monitors. Once you and Jinlins weren't useful anymore, they had decided to get rid of you both, and those Sultan Sworn were in on it. Jinlins still refuses to believe that Solkzagyl isn't the traitor, but his single-minded nature has always been a problem. If he had paid attention, he would have realized that all of the information he had been finding had been being handed to him. Jinlins and all of his Paladins had been being manipulated by the Monitors. Solkzagyl was never a traitor. Jinlins finally realizes that he's right just as he passes out from the beating you gave him. Solkzagyl carries him off to patch him up, and he tells you to watch his back when he wakes because he's going to need someone like you for what's coming next. When Jinlins recovers and sees you again, he rightfully feels bad for trying to kill you. Have you noticed that a lot of your friends try to do that? Of course, just like you've done a few times before, you forgive the man. He lets you know that he's working on a plan to deal with the Monitors now that he knows what really happened with them and Solkzagyl. For the past few years, the man has been fighting them alone. When he went into hiding, he had tried to let Jinlins know what was going on, but he had so many of the Monitors agents around him that he couldn't. That was all on purpose, so they could trick Jinlins into tracking his former master down. After he had found out that Death's Embrace had been behind the deaths of a lot of Sultan Sworn, they tried to get rid of you both. Now that he knows the truth and understands that his own obsession let him get manipulated, he starts to understand that single-minded focus on a goal may not always be a good thing. You don't say. Solkzagyl was able to see the bigger picture the whole time, which is why he gave you the Soul Crystal in the first place. He wanted Jinlins to change the way Paladins operated, making them more like adventurers so they could be more open-minded and better able to think for themselves. Basically, he wanted them to take the sticks out their butts. So instead of his usual method of handling problems, Jinlins decides to be a little reckless. He's going to tell his friends that he's running away to Snowcloak to hide from the assassins, but he expects them to find him since the spies and the Sultan Sworn will rat him out. And when they show up, he's going to fight them. It sounds like a stupid plan, since he doesn't even want you to come and help him. He's gonna die. But fortunately for him, Solkzagyl knew about the man's plan since he didn't really try to hide it, and he has no intention of letting Jinlins fight alone. And of course you won't either. The man's shocked to see the two of you, but since the assassin sent Voidsent after him, he's not gonna turn down the help. After you make quick work of the things, you all split up to track down the assassins because they have to be nearby. It's not hard to find them, and they send so many mages and monsters at you that Jinlins wouldn't have had a chance by himself. But with the three of you working together, you deal with it. That's not the end of the monetarist by a long shot, but it should be enough to hinder them for at least a little while. But they still have the Oathkeeper, so Solkzagyl won't be coming back. Not until all of this is over. But fortunately for Jinlins, he does have you there to watch his back. After the events with Solkzagyl and the Oathkeeper, Jinlins has to admit that the work you've done has actually improved the reputation of the Paladins and made more people want to come and sign up. He actually thinks that you should go and see some of the new recruits. Hearing some words from the famous Paladin should help motivate the guys a bit. I guess he forgot that you're practically a mute, but you still head out to Camp Bluefog anyway. When you get there, Owen, one of the Sultan Sworn, is well aware of how little you talk, so instead of giving a speech, he gets you to do a little fighting just to show off some of your techniques. Seeing how you fight is something that the recruits won't likely forget anytime soon. Back in Ul'dah, after Jinlins tells you to keep doing what you're doing because it's working wonders for their order, Papashan shows up and tells you that he has something he needs to talk to you about. Solkzagyl was still hunting the Oathkeeper, and he was letting Papashan know his progress by sending him letters. The last letter he sent claims that he found the sword, but since then he hasn't been in contact. He would have told Jinlins, but he didn't want the man to worry, so instead he wants you to help him find the lost Paladin. The last letter he sent came from the Falcon's Nest out in Kurthis, so that'll be the best place to start your search. A man called 100 Eyes, a name he probably got because he's always looking in on other people's business, knows Solkzagyl, and he knows that the man is very, very dead. He was killed by bandits, and 100 Eyes buried him himself near Camp Riversmeet. A young man named Constant took the death really hard, and he's been going out there to the grave a lot. You head out there yourself and find Constant being attacked by members of Death's Embrace. They undoubtedly had something to do with Solkzagyl's death, so you finish them off. Constant, of course, is happy that you intervened since he would have been quite dead otherwise. He knows a surprising bit about the group, and he's been warning his friends about them, but they aren't really taking him seriously. You're gonna have to ask him about that later, but you get a call from Papashan to see if you found Solkzagyl, so you're forced to let him know that the man was killed by Death's Embrace, likely because they were the ones who had the Oathkeeper, and when the Paladin tried to take it back, they managed to beat him. That's all just guesswork. For now, your only real lead is Constant, so you head back to Falcon's Nest to talk to him. Apparently Solkzagyl had told the boy about you and he's excited to finally meet you. Solkzagyl had saved his life when he had been attacked by wolves, and after that, he had wanted to become a paladin. Solkzagyl turned him down, but he finally gave in after he heard Constant asking around about the Oathkeeper. Despite training him, Solkzagyl must have thought he wasn't ready to fight Death's Embrace because he went to get the sword back while Constant was away. He feels bad about not being there to back the old paladin up, so he decides to get the Oathkeeper back himself. And of course you're going to help him because while he may want to be a paladin, he's definitely not, and if he runs into Death's Embrace, he will definitely die. Constant goes through Solkzagyl's stuff and he finds a journal with a map of the Gorgane holding. There was a spot marked on the map by the river, but nothing on the paper said why, so it makes sense to go and check it out. There's no telling what's there, so you better be ready for a fight. Constant actually found Solkzagyl's old leg armor and put it on, so he could have a little bit of protection to his thighs. So if he gets attacked by a Lalafell, you should be fine. At the spot, you find Solkzagyl's coronet, which means the man did go there. There's also a trail of frozen blood that you follow, only to end up getting attacked by members of Death's Embrace. There are a lot of them, so they likely made camp somewhere nearby, but they don't seem to have the Oathkeeper. Still, the group has done more than enough to deserve having a few new holes poked in them. The fact that they summoned a void scent to help them fight doesn't make you feel any more sympathy for putting them down. Constant doesn't do too badly in the fight, but he is a bit shocked that the two of you survived at all. But since you didn't find the Oathkeeper, it's back to Falcon's Nest you go to rest and think on what to do next. While the two of you think and plan, Constant tells you the reason he hates Death's Embrace so much. His mother was in a caravan that was raided on the road to Tailfeather, and until Solkzagyl told him that Death's Embrace was responsible, he had given up on figuring out who had murdered his mother. Now that he knows, he wants to stop them so they can't hurt anyone else, especially since the group was targeting the people who didn't have wealth or power, since they wouldn't be missed by anyone that mattered. Constant wants to be a hero for those people, so they'll know that there's someone looking out for them, in much the same way that there are people watching out for the rich. A friend of Constance's from Tailfeather, Grimold, sends him a message saying that he has a letter from Solkzagyl that he wants him to come and get. Since you don't really have any leads on the Oathkeeper, the two of you go to see what Grimold wants. The fact that the letter wasn't sent by a Moogle is weird enough, but having it sent was a part of Solkzagyl's will, so there's no way to figure out why it was sent in such a strange way. The letter says that the Paladin left something for Constantine near the 100 Throws that'll help him become the man he was meant to be, so the two of you head off to see what the man left for him. The gift turns out to be a Paladin soul crystal and some more armor, which starts to make Constantine think he's being led around by the nose. He wishes he could ask Solkzagyl, but it's kinda hard with him being dead, so the boy goes to his fallen mentor's grave to think. Surprisingly, Jinlin shows up there. Apparently he finally made Papa John tell him what happened, and he couldn't believe it, so he came to see for himself. Strangely enough, his presence causes your soul crystal and his to start glowing before your crystal steals the light from his. All the while, a strange robed man stares down at you all and smiles. Jinlin believes the man was watching Constantine, so he's likely a member of Death's Embrace, keeping track of the person who decided to continue Solkzagyl's hunt for the Oathkeeper. Whatever the reason the man was spying on you all, Jinlin wants you to keep watch over Constantine while he goes back to Ul'dah and tries to figure out why your soul stones did what they did. Since he knows that Death's Embrace has the Oathkeeper, Constantine figures that the two of you should just start hunting them. And even if it turns out that they don't have the weapon anymore, getting rid of them would still be doing a public service since they're all pretty much horrible people. So, to start the search, he figures he should check with 100 Eyes since the man seems to know a little bit about everything. Plus, he wants to know exactly how Solkzagyl died. Ironically enough, the man seems reluctant to give the boy any details, which means the death was either extremely brutal or there's something else he's hiding. But the man's not willing to talk about that or anything else, so you continue your hunt elsewhere. You ask around and find out that some people from Ul'dah recently snuck onto an airship that was bringing supplies to Camp Cloudtop and tried to steal some stuff. The Knights drove them off, but they're likely still in the area. They could just be some run-of-the-mill bandits, but it's still worth checking out just in case you found your targets again. Some Knights are already out hunting for the people, and you join them, which makes your job a lot easier. You track down Death's Embrace, and when you deal with them, you find a pair of Paladin gauntlets. It's so ridiculous that each hunt the two of you have gone on has led to the discovery of more armor that Constantine starts to believe that Solkzagyl somehow managed to plan all of this. Back at Falcon's Nest, Constantine starts to wonder why the members of Death's Embrace had started acting like common bandits. It makes him wonder if Solkzagyl actually took the Oathkeeper back and broke the organization before he died. Broken or not, he still plans on finishing off the rest of the group, but that'll have to wait. News comes in saying that 100 Eyes has been badly wounded. The man was out and about when he got attacked by wolves. He's dying, but he wants to talk to you about something, so you rush off to see him before it's too late. He tells you to go to Solkzagyl's grave, dig it up, and give Constantine what you find. He mutters about this last act not being enough to make up for what he's done to his sworn brothers, but it's still something at least. The grave, as everyone should have figured out by now, does not have a body in it, which makes Constantine want some answers. He goes to try and get them from 100 Eyes, but the man is dead when you get back. Surprisingly enough, Papa John is there, and he takes you both out of the city to meet up with, you guessed it, Solkzagyl. The man had set up this Batman level plan because just finding the Oathkeeper wouldn't be enough to restore the honor of the Paladins. The sword had to be found by a worthy Paladin if it was going to mean anything, and a worthy Paladin has to be forged through trials and hardships. He can't simply be taught how to be one. The plan was for Constantine to figure all of this out on his own. He hadn't planned on you interfering. Papa John takes out his soul crystal as part of Solkzagyl's plan, and Constantine's crystal steals the light from it just like yours did to Jinlin's. This causes your crystal to glow with a strange orange light, and Constantine's does the same, which makes Solkzagyl smile. Each soul crystal represents the willpower of its holder, and when paladins are together, the other crystals may submit to the one with the strongest will. Your crystals are literally emitting conqueror's hockey at one another from One Piece. If you don't know what that is, then you have to go and watch that show, or at least read the manga, because that show is fantastic. The more paladins follow their path, the stronger their will grows, and when two strong wills clash, things could go bad, like exploding unstable ether bad. There can't be two alphas in a pack, so you and Constantine have to fight to determine whose will is stronger. The boy thinks that's stupid. Paladins are supposed to defend people, not fight each other for no reason. But that doesn't mean he won't do it if that's what it takes for him to be a paladin. I respect his resolve, but the boy should have known that he couldn't beat you. The fight is over in a few heartbeats. But apparently there's more, and Jinlin walks up demanding that Solkzagyl tells you the whole truth. The soul crystal you had found at the 100 Throws belonged to the first paladin to wield the Oathkeeper. It used to shine brighter than any other crystal, but now both it and the sword are dull, which is why Solkzagyl brought you all together. He has the sword and the soul crystal, and he plans on making them both shine again by handing them over to the most dominant paladin, you. He would use his own soul crystal to reignite the weapon, but he broke his oath by leaving the Sultan sworn, so it won't work. I'm going to take a brief moment to speculate that if the Oathkeeper glows similar to soul crystals, then the weapon is probably more like the Save the Queen sword from Baja than a regular weapon. Soul crystals store will and knowledge similar to auracite, which means that like the Save the Queen, the Oathkeeper may be a weapon made entirely out of auracite, but that's just a theory. In any case, you aren't the strongest paladin. Not yet. Not until you take down Solkzagyl himself, and he is way stronger than Constant. That still doesn't mean he can beat the Warrior of Light. It's not like he's Xenos. With the battle done, your soul crystal takes the light from the others, and Solkzagyl hands you the Oathkeeper. The blade begins to glow brightly, proclaiming you the leader of the Paladins, but you don't plan on taking the job, so you hand the blade over to Jinlins. Constant is a little upset at Solkzagyl for being such a bad mentor, but he's happy he found a good one in you, and now he's free to serve as a free paladin just like he always wanted. And Jinlins vows to uphold the ways of the paladin, even if he never makes the Oathkeeper shine for himself. And Solkzagyl finally agrees to stick around and help him. The next time the Warrior of Light heads to Ul'dah to check on Jinlins, the man has something for you. It's an invitation to join a tournament at the Colosseum. The tournament is called the Ul'dah Cup, which was started by Sasagan ul-Sisagan, the very first Sultan of Ul'dah, so it's a tournament that's as old as the nation itself, but it hasn't been held in years. The Sultana started it up again, and she sent out invitations to Eorzea's best swordsman, which obviously meant you get an invitation because who wouldn't want to see you fight? Jinlins is all for you competing because the other members of the Sultan Sworn could learn a lot by seeing you in action, not to mention the prize is said to be a tome that has the secret techniques of the first captain of the Sultan Sworn, so that has drawn out a lot of great fighters. So, since you're going to compete, you have to go and head to register before it's too late. When you show your invitation, Bartholomew, one of the Sultan Sworn, gets really excited that he might get to fight you. I guess getting beat up by somebody you idolize is a prize for some people. Personally, if someone who fights gods joins a tournament that I'm in and I'm just a regular named guy, I'd probably withdraw so I could keep my dignity and my teeth. But it's too late for that now because the tournament is about to start, so you head to the Gladiators Guild where the combatants are waiting. Mila, the leader of the Gladiators Guild, is happy to see that you're doing the guild proud by competing, but it won't be as easy as you might think. Some of the best fighters in the realm are there, and they've done a lot to earn their reputations. The rules are pretty simple. If you win, you advance. If you lose, then you're out. You keep fighting one-on-one matches until there's only one person left standing. The fighters are broken into two groups, gnawed and thawed, and they fight until they reach the top of their particular group. Then the champions face off against one another. It's pretty simple. After Mila explains everything, the opening ceremony begins. Nanamo, the Sultana, gives the opening speech, announcing that it's been 100 years since the last Ul'dah Cup, and she's decided to revive it. And all of the money that it generates will be used to help all of the refugees living in Ul'dah. When Nanamo's speech is done, Adrian, a writer for the Mithril Eye, talks about the different contestants. There's going to be everything from Sultan Sworn to Ishgardian Knights fighting, so the preliminary matches are going to be intense. They're breaking the contestants into groups of 8, meaning you'll have to win 3 fights to make it to the finals, and your very first match is against Bartholomew. The guy was looking forward to fighting you, and while he's happy to test himself against you, he's a bit upset that he's going to get eliminated in the first round because, let's be honest, he's going to lose. The man's not bad, which makes me understand why he wanted to test himself on you, but not bad still puts him way beneath you, so of course you win your first round and get to go on to fight the Bronze Bull, a gladiator who's put a lot of work into his swordsmanship. But he still loses too. Next you go up against Hendeloop from Ishgard. The knight pulls off some techniques that members of the Heavens Ward had used against you, but you beat them, and this time it's no different. You take him down, putting yourself at the top of the Thal group and earning your spot in the finals. Apparently some very strange looking Lalafellan bet a lot of money on you, and they're extremely happy that you won. Bartholomew and your other competitors aren't upset over their losses either, and they plan on taking that fight and learning from it along with the rest of your tournament matches. Also, it seems like Mila was looking for you, so you go to see what she wanted. The woman is proud of you for winning, and she's looking forward to finally getting across blades with you, after she wins her division of course. You go to watch the matches to see what you'll be up against, And apparently Constantine is in the tournament too. And he won against the local favorite, meaning he hasn't been skipping out on his training since the last time you saw him. Of course, after that he gets to fight Mila and gets thoroughly stumped because a few months of training wouldn't give the young Paladin the skill he needs to beat the leader of the Gladiators Guild. After beating Constantine, Mila gets to face off against a mystery fighter called Black Lotus, who is apparently pretty good. Actually, he's better than pretty good. He manages to beat Mila, something that nobody expected, and makes it to the final, which means he's your opponent for the championship match. Ul'dah, one of the Lalafell who was betting on the fights, is not happy that Mila lost, because it means he lost a lot of money. His companion is even more nervous than he is, because if Black Lotus beats you, then the two of them may very well lose everything, which is why you shouldn't gamble. Unless of course you rig the game, which Ul'dah apparently has. The man seems to know how to get to the Lotus, and whatever he's planning he's already set it in motion. Mila's not happy that she lost, but the way the Lotus fought reminds her of someone else. She's not a sore loser though, so she doesn't make any excuses for a defeat. She just wants you to make sure that you win. Also, the Lotus told her that he wanted to talk to you, and he spoke like he knew you. But let's be honest, at this point, who doesn't know you? He's waiting for you at the quicksand, so you swing by to see what he wants. When you make it to the tavern, you catch sight of a Lalafell trying to convince the Lotus to withdraw from the fight. At first the man refuses, but when the Lalafell tells him something that you can't hear, the man's response implies that he might be forced to do what Ul'dah demands. When Ul'dah leaves, the Warrior of Light asks if anything she can do to help, but the Lotus says he can handle it. But this little meeting will have to wait until later. He leaves without saying anything else, and when you tell Mila, she says that maybe you can just talk to him in the arena during your match. However, you won't get the chance, since Black Lotus withdraws from the tournament, making you the winner by default. Everyone is upset, but right now the announcers don't have any more to tell them, so they want everyone to stay put until they figure things out. Mila already knows that something shady is going on, which is usually the case when a fighter withdraws, and she plans on figuring out what it is so you can have your match, because winning because your opponent gave up isn't even close to a real win. So the two of you start to ask around. The registrar claims that the Lotus withdrew right after you went into the arena, and he left without giving his reasons. He was headed toward Pearl Lane, so you head there to catch up with him. When you find him, it turns out that you already are very well acquainted with him. The Lotus is Aldis, a legendary gladiator who was banned from the arena and is a longtime friend of Mila's. He's fine with telling you why he withdrew, but he doesn't want you to tell anyone else. After you all dealt with Leavold forever ago, Aldis left Ul'dah and wandered the land. During his travels, he ran into a child, a kid orphaned by the wars, and he helped him out. Once the kid learned who Aldis was, he started following him around and trying to convince him to teach him how to use the sword, and he's been following the man ever since. The Lalafell who wanted him to withdraw thought the boy was Aldis' son and took him hostage to make the man withdraw. Whether it was his kid or not, Aldis wouldn't gamble with any child's life, so he pulled out of the tournament. Mila catches up to you and she's not surprised that the Lotus was Aldis. She recognized his fighting style and she's a little upset that he didn't even send her a letter while he was gone. Bit of advice: if you're in a relationship with a woman who teaches people how to stab people with a sword for a living, never, and I mean never, leave her messages on read. I'm just saying. She wants to know why he came back to Ul'dah, and his sole reason was because he'd heard that you became a free paladin and no one could beat you in a fight. He wanted to see if that was true. When he got back, he heard about the Ul'dah Cup being started back up again, and he figured that if he entered, he'd get his fight with you. If not, he'd just win the thing and leave, because it's not like anyone else could beat him anyway. When he decided to enter, a friend got his invitation for him, then he hit his face and boom, he was in. And all of that effort went to waste because someone wanted to make some money. When he mentions they took his kid, Mila freaks out. Not over the kidnapping. It's Ul'dah, so that type of stuff just means it's a Tuesday. But she freaks out because she thinks Aldis has a kid. He leaves out the rest of the story, partly to mess with her, and partly because he doesn't have time to explain it again. While he kept his word, the kidnappers didn't, so now he has to go rescue the boy. And he could use your help. The three of you split up and ask around to find info on the boy's location. You track the kidnappers down because you do this type of stuff for a living, and after spouting a line from Terminator saying that you want their clothes, their boots, and their chocobo, you proceed to act out the rest of the scene and thoroughly pummel them in. Mila and Aldis show up after you save the boy, who apologizes for being too weak to save himself, then vowing to train until he's as strong as you and Aldis so he can take care of himself. While you did track down the kidnappers, Aldis managed to find the evidence needed to have Ul'dah arrested, so that problem's been taken care of too. Out of all the stuff the two of you said, the only thing Mila heard was that the kid wasn't Aldis' actual son. She's happy about that, but she tries to act like she doesn't care. With the evidence showing that Aldis was forced into withdrawing, it may be possible to get your match back on the books, especially since everyone wanted to see it. Mila rushes off to get it all set up, and it doesn't take much to make the people agree. Everyone shows up to see the match, but Aldis is forced to reveal his face to the crowd before the fighting begins. Despite the fact that he's been expelled from the arena, people still want to see the greatest swordsman of the era fight the Warrior of Light, so the battle is on. Nanamo gives her blessing and the two of you get to it. Godslayer faces off against the Sword of Nal, and the man proves to be a warrior worthy of his title. He's a king among warriors, but what is a king to a god? With the battle done, even though he lost, Aldis has to admit that the fight was everything he had hoped for. But you're the champion of the Ul'dah Cup, meaning you've won the prize, a tome with the techniques of the first leader of the Sultan Sworn. There's just one small problem. It doesn't exist. The whole thing was a ruse to lure the best fighters to the arena so people could see different techniques and have something to work toward, just like the first Sultan had done. The tradition had stopped when the royal house no longer had the money to fund it, but now that they have the resources again, Papashan figures that all of Eorzea could benefit from what the fighters learn in the arena. That way they'll be better prepared to face off against all of the threats that attack their nation. While that's all well and good, you still deserve a prize, so Nanamo gives you the right to ask her for anything you want. And what you want is for her to pardon Aldis. He'd been banished for taking bribes, something she easily forgives, allowing the Sword of Nal to once again freely compete in the arena. It's been a little while since the Ul'dah Cup, and it's only right that the Warrior of Light swings back by Ul'dah to check on her friends. Jinlins lets you know that while you were away, the Sultan Sworn started working with the Gladiators Guild to help make the city safer. They even started training together now so they can hone each other's skills. A lot of the changes were Mila's idea, which made Jinlins get a newfound respect for the woman. But lately she's been kinda out of it. She's not talking as much, and it seems like something's always bothering her. He wanted to ask her if she was okay, but he doesn't really know her all that well, so he didn't want to overstep. But the two of you are good friends, so you asking her personal questions wouldn't really be a problem. Sure enough, it doesn't take too much prodding for her to open up to you. Her issue, obviously, is Aldis. Since he's been pardoned, he's been in Ul'dah more, but Mila still can't figure out what's going on in his head. Not surprisingly, the man shows up while you're talking about him, and instead of being in his usual gear, the man is dressed like a samurai. After losing to you in the Ul'dah Cup, he decided to enhance his training, and he had heard about the old samurai who had embarrassed a lot of gladiators at the arena, so he figured he'd go to the Far East and learn from some of them. It's funny how Musosai is still influencing things even after his death. Since you're there, he wants to go a few rounds with you, just to see how well he does after his training. Of course, the fight can't happen in the arena since it's not an official match, and Mila wants you to do it away from the city anyway. That way the guards won't show up when the two of you start jumping around and swinging swords at each other. The two of you meet up outside of the city, and Aldis gets down in a familiar stance, proving that he did learn a little bit about being a samurai. But as he looks at you, your aura is so strong that he doesn't even need to attack to know that he doesn't stand a chance against you now. He can't understand how you got so powerful since the last time you met, but it's not really a secret. You fought for people you cared about, and that made you push yourself to become even more powerful to protect them. The man doesn't even waste time drawing his sword since he knows that fighting you as he is will be a guaranteed loss, so he leaves and goes to think alone. Mila has never seen Aldis back down from a fight, even if he thought he'd lose, but there's no point in trying to guess the man's feelings, so you just head back to the guild. Aldis shows up there a little later, once again wearing his old clothes. Apparently he's already given up on the whole samurai thing. He had thought about what you said about protecting something important to you so you could get stronger, and it made him think about what mattered to him the most. It took him a while to figure it all out, but now he knows what's truly important to him, what he really wants to fight for. He looks Mila in the eyes and tells her the truth that he's been keeping to himself for so long. The thing that he wants to protect the most is the Gladiators Guild. That's not what Mila expected to hear, and she's a little disappointed, But the old guildmaster had treated Aldis like a son, and the guild was one of the few places that he truly felt at home. And he wants to be there from now on to help out. None of this was what Mila wanted, but since Aldis wants to stay and be a part of the guild, then he can. She doesn't have a problem with that, as long as he's fine starting off as a brand new member of the guild, something that Aldis is more than happy to do. Outside of the tribunal in Ishgard, the Warrior of Light comes across a man who's muttering about a heretic who fought like a demon. He took a lot of wounds, but they didn't even slow him down. Darkness poured out of his body and wrapped him up like a shroud, but before he could do whatever he was planning, a temple knight impaled him. Rumors are spreading that the man was a dark knight, but there's no way to find out since the temple knights are dumping the man's corpse in the broom, and it won't be long before all of his possessions are stolen. You being you track down the corpse, and when you touch it, darkness envelops you, and a voice speaks into your mind, calling your name and telling you to see. You black out, and when you open your eyes, the man that you thought was dead is standing over you. He introduces himself as Fray, and before you can ask, he lets you know that he's not a heretic, not like the Temple Knights would listen. But he doesn't really care what they think. He's more worried about you. When you touched him, you touched his soul stone, and that could not have been pleasant. You tell him about the voice, but before Fray can question you more about it, someone calls out for help. You go to run off and help, like usual, but Fray blocks your path. Before you run off, he needs to tell you about what's happening to you. Everyone has darkness in them, but the soul crystal allows you to channel it. But if you do it without getting trained, it could end badly, which is why Fray offers to teach you to become a dark knight. Because there's a woman screaming nearby, Fray keeps the explanation short. Dark knights don't care about fame. Their order does what they think is right, be it defending the weak or punishing the guilty. The rules of nations and kings don't mean anything to the knights. They are shields used to hide from justice, and dark knights don't need shields. Since his crystal resonated with you, Fray gives it to you along with his blade so you can use it in your fight for justice. As long as you understand that your new path comes with a cost. Everyone may not be grateful for your work or happy with what you do, but that can't stop you from doling out justice because you hesitating could lead to people suffering. He wants you to think on that while you check on the screaming woman. The screams came from an old woman. She'd bumped into a temple knight on accident and he'd hit her. Her granddaughter had yelled at the knight, then he dragged her off. He may not kill her, but the memories of what he'll do to her will scar her forever. But Fray has a better idea. The two of you could go and beat them to within an inch of their lives and save the girl. That idea is far more appealing, and Fray assures the old woman that her granddaughter will be safe, and when he's done, the temple knights will never bother them again. Fray believes that the knight took the girl to the tribunal. He gives you one last piece of advice before you set out. The knights may threaten to kill the girl if you come closer. If they do, then you have to let them know that you didn't come to save her. You came to kill them. Once they know she's useless as a hostage, they'll either fight or run. As you head to the tribunal, Fray tells you about drawing on the darkness within you to strengthen your body. It's like drawing in ether to do magic, only you use fear, pain, and your other darker emotions. With your combat experience, the new techniques shouldn't be too hard to learn. And you'll need them, because when you find the girl, she's surrounded by temple knights. One of them takes the girl off, while 3 others attack you. After the beating you give them, they run off, calling for reinforcements. Fray helps you draw out the darkness within, and you cut a path through the nights while Fray shouts out some impressive insults and threats, until you reach the girl. Fray shouts to all the remaining knights that if they come after you, he'll come to their homes next. Then you take the girl and leave. The girl's thankful for your help, but neither she nor her grandmother had screamed for help, so she doesn't know what you heard. But whatever called you, she's happy it did, and she's glad you killed those knights. After she leaves, Fray commends you for how fast you caught on, but you have way further to go, and the training will be dangerous. But you can handle it. In the meantime, Fray thinks it best for you to go your separate ways for a while since you did just attack the Temple Knights, and they'll probably come looking for you. While you're apart, he expects you to get stronger. When things settle down, you meet Fray in the broom where he picks up with your training. First, he explains the voice you heard. All Dark Knights hear a different voice guiding them. The more you draw on your power, the more clear the voice will become. However, your training will be better done somewhere other than Ishgard, so you and Fray head to Little Alamigo. Fray has a ritual called Communion for you to complete, to help you channel your darkness better in battle. It's dangerous, and it could kill you, so first he wants you to fight something strong and feral, so he can see how you handle the battle. You check with one of the locals to find a suitable beast. There's a place called the Red Labyrinth filled with large, savage creatures that the trappers in the area avoid. Sounds perfect. And the two of you head out. After you bring down the beast, Fray guides you through the ritual, increasing the darkness within you and causing you to hear the voice again, although it doesn't say anything useful. Still, that's progress. Fray tells you that sometimes the voice comes from someone the Dark Knight is meant to find, which means you could have to travel, something that doesn't really bother you considering what you do for a living. With that, the ritual is over, and it's time to move forward with your training. This time you head to the Burning Wall, where Fray has you slay more beasts in what is honestly a pointless display. Fray is admittedly trying to get you to resent him for making you waste your time. He wants those emotions to be strong in you for the next ritual. He begins the ritual, but it's interrupted when Isambard, a man you worked with forever ago when you first joined the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, comes asking for help. The Al'Mozja attacked a caravan and abducted some people. He tried to get the Brass Blades and the Immortal Flames to help, but they're too busy to even send a few men. You know what the Al'Mozja will do to people. They will be made into thralls to Ifrit, but Fray thinks it's a stupid idea to charge into an enemy camp to save some idiots who didn't learn to fight before traveling through hostile territory. No matter how stupid it is, you're going to risk your life for them because that's what you do, and Fray knows it. Reluctantly, he agrees to help you save the people. You head to the encampment, and the two of you cut a swath through the Al'Mozja. While Fray didn't want to come, as the fighting goes on, he begins to revel in the bloodshed. The two of you free the captives and murder all of the Al'Mozja in the camp. Isambard is happy that you saved the captives, but he seems a bit uncomfortable about how you massacred the Al'Mozja. Fray takes it with a grain of salt. People who have never done battle don't get to judge what the ones they ask to protect them do to their enemies. With the distraction done, Fray continues the ritual, drawing out more of the darkness within you and prompting the voice to come back again. It still babbles nonsense, despite how far your powers have come. Fray thinks that maybe it's because you still don't understand what it means to be a Dark Knight. You consider yourself a hero and you believe you can save everyone. Dark Knights understand that that's only a pipe dream. Sometimes you won't be able to save everyone. Sometimes you'll only be able to save yourself. You can't be a slave to everyone else's burdens, otherwise you won't be able to grow. Your constant desire to solve everyone's problems makes Fray start to question your commitment to your training. The fact that you haven't heard the voice say anything else is proof that you are clinging to your old ways, despite Fray's best attempts to help you improve. As he's chastising you, his knees buckle, but he shrugs it off and decides that he's not giving up on you. He's just going to have to test you more, and the next test will come at the Morabi docks, despite the fact that Fray hates the ocean. He and a friend had a bad experience with a boat, and it apparently scarred him for life. His story is interrupted by the sound of someone asking a Maelstrom soldier for help nearby. The soldier is talking to the man when he spots you. He remembers you from when you saved Limsa Lamensa from Leavold a while back, and he wanted to thank you. The traitor who was asking the guard for help decides to beg for yours. He got robbed by some Kikiran bandits nearby, which Fray blatantly asks why should he care. Kikiran are hardly worth fighting. As weak as they are, if you get robbed by them, you're not a victim, you're just an idiot. Nevertheless, you are still Mr. Goody Two-Shoes and offer to help. Fray is not happy about it, but since you're doing it, you may as well use it for training. He wants you to go wild and let the darkness guide you. The Kikiran don't stand a chance. When you bring the man's cargo back, he has the audacity to complain about how much blood is on the packages. Like you didn't just risk your life for him, for free. He even goes as far as to demand you pay him for his lost goods. Fray loses it, calling the man needy, selfish, and weak. Him and all of the others who always ask you to do things for them that they should be doing for themselves. But then he says something very strange. He says, I should have let you all drown in Leviathan's tidal wave so I wouldn't have to hear your constant whining. Then he runs off. The traitor apologizes, and the soldier, while he understands you being upset, that was a bit harsh. You ignore them and run off after Fray. He hopes you understand what he was telling you before. While the people you have helped did help you grow your dark powers, you don't need them anymore. Doing remedial tasks for fools is a waste of your time. You need to figure out what the voice you've been hearing is trying to tell you and discover your true calling. And you may do better if you leave the land of Eorzea and go where no one knows you. A Dark Knight cannot be bound to any land. Fray leaves to give you time to think on it. He tells you to go to the Gates of Judgment, and there you can give him your answer. At the gates, you call out for him, and the sound of your voice catches the attention of some of the knights who you worked with on your hunt for Shiva. Of course, they're coming to ask you for help. A group of giants have been raiding caravans in the Danafin Pass as they prepare to expand their territory. The knights have been ordered to clear them out, but it's no easy mission, not for the numbers they have. But you are worth 100 men on your own, so with your help, it'll be easy. Fray hasn't showed up yet, so you agree, and follow the knights as, unbeknownst to you, Fray looks on in disgust. The giants fall easily, with only a few injuries to the knights. The knight claims he's been following your exploits since you first came to Whitebrim, and while your combat skills were always impressive, it was your willingness to help anyone without asking for anything in return that made you his hero. You never worried about someone's station or their race, you just treated everyone like they all mattered. Amidst all the praise, another knight runs up bringing orders from Lord Drillmont that you are to come to Whitebrim immediately. You have been accused of a few things after you were seen talking to a corpse in the broom. The accusations are serious. You may be asked to surrender your weapon. When you reach Whitebrim, Fray is standing in the middle of a crowd of fallen soldiers. When he sees you, he laughs at the thought of you surrendering your weapon, mentioning something else that he shouldn't know about, the betrayal in Ul'dah where you and the Scions had been framed for murder. He knew about Leviathan, claiming he killed the Primal even though he wasn't there. He knew about the betrayal of the Crystal Braves, even though he wasn't there. He has referred to the two of you as we the entire time, and it took all of this for you to finally realize the truth. Fray was dead when you found him. He hasn't been traveling with you. You had taken his sword and soul crystal, but you wanted a teacher who could say the things that you wouldn't. Someone who could yell at the idiots who kept sending you on fetch quests. So you conjured one. There was no Fray. All of the cruel comments he made, all of the savage brutality he committed in combat, that all came from you. The people who were all looking at Fray when he talked weren't seeing him. They were trying to figure out who you were looking at. They thought you were going crazy. But now, the darkness that you fed manifests itself fully, dropping the disguise of Fray and wearing its true face, yours. It attacks you, aiming to take your body for itself. Fighting your darker self is a fight that alone you couldn't hope to win, but Drillmont and some of the other knights join in to help you overcome your darkness. As it dies, it lets you know that while you may have won, your friends have seen the darker side of you, the things that you kept hidden from the others, and there's no putting that genie back in the bottle. They won't look at you the same anymore. However, your friends say otherwise, and you finally accept the darker part of you, absorbing it back into yourself. It lets you know that when you get tired of playing Mr. Nice Guy, it'll be more than happy to take over for you. All you have to do is ask. After the Fight Club-esque incident with Fray and your darker half, Lord Drillmont and the others decide to put the incident behind them since you've done so much for them that you deserve the right to act a little crazy sometimes. One of the Temple Knights decides to dive straight back into his old ways and asks you to come and help him and some allies with yet another problem. However, this knight uses your overly agreeable nature to lead you into an ambush because despite what some of the others think of your good deeds, to some, you're just a heretic who attacked the Holy Knights. Him and two of his friends try to kill you because despite knowing what you can do, they think they're good enough to take you down. After you kill two of them, the last one still threatens you, which, while some people may call that brave, is just dumb. He doesn't even change his tune when the most menacing looking Ul'dah I've ever seen walks up. Because you're kind of dumb yourself, you let the knight run off instead of burying him in the snow like he wanted to do to you. The Ul'dah, a dark knight named Sidu, questions your intelligence since you followed some men who wanted to kill you, then acted surprised when they tried to do it. Something he knows that you didn't learn from Fray. The man was his friend, and he had thought Fray had died until he heard about someone using his sword in battle, so he came to investigate to find out what really happened to his friend and how you learned to fight like him. When you tell him the story, he's not as surprised as you would expect. Apparently, it's not the first time someone channeled a dead dark knight who trained them and tried to steal their body. Sid and Fray had trained together, and the man had been incredibly powerful, but that hadn't saved him in the end. He is glad to see that you are carrying on his legacy, and the fact that you learned so much with only his soul crystal to guide you is a testament to how powerful you could become. He has something that he wants to talk to you about later, so he tells you to meet him at the Forgotten Night in Ishgard. The first thing he tells you is the fact that he met you while you were doing something stupid proves that you have no idea what it means to be a Dark Knight. The very first Dark Knight faced off against the clergy because he didn't agree with their unjust actions, and he sacrificed his home, family, and his friends to fight for what he believed was right. And that is what all Dark Knights must do. The common people may hate you, and others may call you a criminal, but it doesn't matter. Even when they hate you or try to kill you, Dark Knights do what's right no matter what. If you're not ready to do that, then Sid wants you to give him your sword and soul crystal and pick up another job like a botanist or something. The Warrior of Light's sword was expensive, so there was no way she would hand it over, and she claims that she's more than willing to do what's necessary to bring about justice. However, her actions have proved otherwise. Sid puts a sword on the table and lets you know that he fixed your mistake of letting the man live who tried to kill you. Mercy is something that is seldom repaid with kindness. The first Ishgardians who met Al-Ra thought they were Dravanians. Sid and the others had escaped from the Garlean armies only to be attacked by another nation because they mistook them for dragons. However, the Al-Ra could fight, and they fended off the Ishgardians, but instead of killing them all, they let them live. Instead of being grateful for the mercy they were showed, the Ishgardians got reinforcements and came back and began murdering every man, woman, and child they could find. He told you this so you could understand that you have to do what needs to be done because he needs your help with something. When Sid's master died, he told him and Fray a riddle about harnessing the abyss. They didn't understand what he meant, and they had hoped they would learn the meaning as they grew as Dark Knights. So they continued to fight against all forms of injustice until they came across the Ellison girl who you should have seen standing beside him. Her name is Riel. She was running from a group of Temple Knights who were trying to kill her when Sid and Fray saw her and stepped in. They went into hiding together afterwards, but Fray got caught in the streets when he was grabbing supplies, which is when he was killed, and you came across his corpse and decided to talk to it because reasons. Sid can't protect Riel alone. He hasn't even figured out why they're after her, but what he does know is that if he dies, they'll kill her. In exchange for finishing your training, Sid wants you to help him protect the girl, and possibly figure out what his master's last words meant. Since the Warrior of Light agrees to help guard the girl, Riel starts to talk to you, although she still doesn't say much. The Temple Knights claim she's an abomination who needs to die for her sins, but she doesn't even know what her sins are, and she nearly bursts into tears when you ask her about her parents. But she does trust Sid, and she wants you to watch his back so he doesn't end up like Fray. Since the introductions are out of the way, it's time to get back to the task at hand of figuring out why the Temple Knights want the girl dead. Sid had overheard some knights talking about some Vanu healers who can see their patients' ether and diagnose illnesses just by looking at you. Riel's not sick, but maybe the Vanu can tell you if something's strange about her ether that makes the knights want to kill her. You take a trip to Camp Cloudtop where you are forced to collect an offering before the Vanu will deal with you. Considering all the time I spent maxing out my reputation with them, you would think they'd let me skip this step, but nope. At least the dance they give you is worth it. With the offering in hand, you give it to the Vanu healer who takes a look at Riel's ether, freaks out, and runs away. And of course, some Temple Knights show up to try to kill you. Sid recognizes some of them as members of a group of knights who don't answer to the Lord Commander, as if Emmerich would send knights to murder a child. The people probably wouldn't take too kindly to knights murdering a kid in the street, which would explain why they waited until you were out of the city to attack. So other than freaking out a Vanu and killing a few knights, the trip to Cloudtop was totally worthless. Back in Ishgard, the only thing Sid got from the Vanu healer before she ran off was that a great spirit lies in Riel. That little tidbit gives him the idea to take Riel to some people who are familiar with talking to spirits. That will be the conjurers of Gridania. Ironically enough, Fray had been skilled in white magic, but that took him months to learn, and it came really easily to Riel. Those particular skills tend to be genetic, so it's possible her ancestors were conjurers who did something that tainted their ether, and those traits are why the knights want her dead, but the only way to find out is to head to Gridania. Of course, the knights will be after you as soon as you leave the city, so you're going to need to be careful. Sure enough, a large amount of knights attack you only moments after you leave the city, and they are dead set on burying Riel in the snow. But for some reason they forgot that you've killed dragons and gods. A few dozen armored men really aren't that much of a challenge. Safely in Gridania, Brother Isumi, the Pajal leader of the Gladiators Guild who Sid mistakes for a child, is eager to see the girl. As a quick side note, the Pajal aren't a separate race, but they're more like a mutation in some Hero children. They age slowly and have a natural connection to the forest and the elementals, and even though they have horns, they're not demons. Isumi checks her and he believes that she radiates powers similar to someone who drank dragon blood, but otherwise she's totally healthy. The idea of Riel being accused of participating in the insane rituals of the heretics angers Sid, and he's even more angry that she didn't speak up for herself. However, at the inn in Gridania, she finally tells you some of her story. She had been locked in a windowless prison cell, and while no one claimed she had drank the blood, they did say it was better that she was locked away. Whether she drank dragon blood or not, the fact that her ether shares some Dravanian traits means she'll never be safe in Ishgard. So Sid decides that it may be a good idea to take her to see some Dravanians to determine if she really has ether that resembles theirs. Of course, Dravanians tend to eat people from Ishgard when they see them, since the last time they trusted Ishgardians they were betrayed, had their eyes stolen, and were murdered. However, since you've already made friends with some of the Dravanian leaders, you take them to see Vidofnir with no fear of her trying to chew on any of you. She sends you to take some flowers to a dragon who's dying, and she immediately smells the essence of her dead husband in Riel. His blood flows in her veins, but it's diluted, like she wasn't the one who drank his blood, which is why she hasn't been taken over by it. One of her parents must have done it. And the Temple Knights are well aware of this, which is why they will stop at nothing to kill her. Sid believes that if he could harness the Abyss, he'd have the power to protect her, but the dragon laughs at him, claiming that he understands less than the little creatures that live in the mists around Somal about what he seeks. Sid's eager to learn more since the dragon seems to know a bit about what he's trying to do, but she's tired of talking to you now, so it's back to Ishgard you go. Dragon blood or not, Sid gave his word that he'd protect Riel, and he plans on doing it no matter what. Which is a good thing because a priestess named Ystrid, the one who's been sending the knights after Riel, shows up at the Forgotten Night. She tells you that it is the will of the goddess that the abomination be killed, and if you hand her over, the goddess may forgive you. Sid laughs in her face, and Ystrid tries another approach. She challenges you all to a trial by combat. If you survive, she'll let Riel live. If you die, then we all know what she'll do to the girl. And if you refuse, she'll burn the whole inn to the ground and kill everyone inside. If you run away, she'll kill everyone who gives you shelter or even sells you a meal. The woman is insane, and Sid is more than willing to stab her now, but she wasn't stupid enough to come alone, and her men might start murdering the other patrons if you attack her, so both of you accept the challenge. Ystrid goes to leave, but Riel calls out to her, revealing what you probably already guessed. Ystrid is her mother. Sid is not happy that it took this long for Riel to let him know that her mother was the reason the knights were after her all along, which, considering how Fray died protecting her, that was something that she should have told them. Which he does have a point, but Riel is a child, and having your mother wanting you dead is probably not the easiest thing to talk about. Now that the truth is out, finally you find out the whole story. For generations, the members of Riel's family have given their lives to the church. They usually ended up with very high positions of power, and Ystrid was headed in the same direction until her husband was accused of being a heretic. When she confronted him, he drank blood and finished the transformation he had been working on for decades. The Temple Knights killed him, and Ystrid had their daughter locked away. His plan was actually a good way to destroy the church. Marry into a family with authority for generations, corrupt yourself with dragon blood slowly so no one notices, have a child who will eventually inherit all of that family's power and be born with dragon blood with no one ever knowing. Now, one of the very things they preach against would be their leader, and the fact that they couldn't tell the difference would invalidate all of their teachings. But he failed, and now his daughter is being hunted by the Temple Knights. Riel doesn't want either of you to participate in the trial because there's no way her mother will fight fair, but Sid has a plan. When he had mentioned learning to use the Abyss to the dragon, it had said the tiny beings in the mist know a better way to harness true power. If they can teach you, then you should have the power to beat Ystrid and her knights. There's only one group that fit the dragon's description. It's once again time to deal with the most annoying creatures in Eorzea, the Mughals. You head to the Churning Mist and chat with Magi, who has never heard of knights who focused on using the power of darkness, and honestly he thinks it's a horrible way to live, but he does think he knows why the dragon sent you to him. Sid is not impressed with the Mughals, but Riel is even more fed up with this entire endeavor than he is. She's tired of Sid claiming that he's doing all of this for her benefit when the only thing he really cares about is the Abyss. He's taken her halfway around the world looking for new ways to kill himself, then using her as an excuse. She wants to know why he's really doing all of this. He doesn't really have an answer, so naturally he starts yelling, mainly at you for just standing around and staring all the time without saying anything, which is kind of annoying. Seeing you all argue makes Magi start to understand the whole darkness thing. It reminds him of a legend of a Mughal named Mog who liked to dance, which doesn't sound like it has anything to do with the dark arts, but Magi claims that it does. He says that Sid's master was right when he told him to submit to the flame to harness the Abyss. Sid just never knew what he meant. Fortunately, Magi will show you after you go and get him some palm work. While the two of you go out, Magi wants Riel to stay and talk to him. When you return with the palm word, he gives you another task, to kill some Tulahans, because Mughals like to pawn off their chores on other people. Afterwards, he wants you to meet him in Asa. You do the job, but when you and Sid meet up in Asa, armed Mughals show up claiming that while you were distracted, they kidnapped Riel. Since they had so much fun playing together, they decided to keep her forever, and with their concealing magic, you'll never be able to find her. Sid jumps straight into his usual way of dealing with things. He takes out his sword and starts attacking while shouting out some colorful threats about how he's going to rip their palms off and choke them with them. After thoroughly beating up the Mughals, all but one who fell asleep because Mughal, they ask Sid why does he even want her back, since he doesn't seem to like having her around all that much. He says it's because he swore an oath, and that's what Dark Knights do. But another Mughal counters, claiming that flimsy reasons like that don't give you enough strength to protect anyone. If you really want to draw out your full power when fighting for someone, you have to actually care about them. Of course, they deliver the message in the form of a song because Mughal, but the message has some merits. And no, I'm not singing it. I'm trying to gain subscribers, not run you guys off. Now that the fighting's over, Magi shows up with Riel, who says that she knows the reason he and Fray helped her is because it's what their master would have done, and he thinks it will make him stronger, because the only thing he really cares about is killing Temple Knights. So he's not fighting for her, and Fray didn't die for her. They were only doing what they thought was best for themselves. Sid admits that everything he's done has been for his parents, his master, and himself. He apologizes for not being honest with her, and he swears that after the trial, whatever happens in the future will be her decision, which is all she's been asking for since the beginning. With this little escapade out of the way, you head back to Ishgard with Sid cursing about the Mughals half the way and telling you why he hates the Temple Knights so much for the rest of the trip. He was about Riel's age when his family came to Ishgard looking for a better life. When the Temple Knights who they had fought and let live came back, they said they would show them mercy by letting them pick the order they died in. Sid watched his parents get killed, but when it was his turn, a man in black armor killed the knights and took him under his wing and trained him to defend the weak and punish the wicked. Now he realizes he used that mantra to get revenge on the knights, and he mistreated Riel in the process. But he's all she has at the moment, and he intends to defend her in this trial with his life. Istrid sent for all of you to meet her in the Western Highlands away from the eyes of the people, and proof that this certainly won't be a fair fight. But it doesn't matter. The three of you head out to face Riel's mother. The woman came with a small army of knights, but with you and Sid fighting and Riel healing, you cut them down until only Istrid is left. She can't understand why Sid fought so hard for the abomination, but in an act of mercy that you would have never expected to see from him, he offers to spare the woman if she leaves you alone. She refuses. She vows to hunt Riel down wherever she goes until she finally kills the girl, because the gods demand it. Accepting that her mother will never leave her alone, she gives Sid the go-ahead to finish her off, something he has no problem doing. True to his word, he defers to Riel to see what they do next, and she wants you all to go back to Ishgard together. Ironically enough, Sid realizes that the moment he let go of all of his rage and his desire for vengeance, he fully understood what his master had meant. He's learned how to unlock the power he wanted, and he's willing to use it to keep Riel safe, if she wants him to stick around. She does, but only if he stops the silent Batman-style brooding and talks to her more, something he agrees to do by grunting. In the meantime, while you have dealt with her mother, there may be others who know of her bloodline and may come hunting for her. If they do, Sid will be ready, and if things get too tough, he'll just give you a call. After dealing with Riel's crazy mother and returning to Ishgard, a lot changes in the city. The separation between the factions has faded for the most part, and with the Dragon Song War being over, things are looking up. However, Sidurgu always knows that there's always somebody doing something bad no matter how good things look, and as Dark Knights, it's your job to keep all the criminals in check. But first you have to find them, so the two of you head out to patrol the city. As you pass Fortemp's Manor, you can't help but to think about everything that brought you to this point, and all the people you failed to save along the way. Sid and Riel walk up, finding you lost in thought just staring at the manor. Since they don't know about your odd history in Ishgard, you fill them in, but while you're talking, your soul crystal breaks in half. A strange young boy with long hair walks up claiming to be responsible. He calls himself Mist, although Sid doesn't believe him. Mist is a name given to orphans in the Broom, but this boy looks like a young nobleman. To be honest, he looks like what you would get if Haurchefant and Issel had a son. Mist claims to have a power that he wants to use to help people, but that power requires a lot of ether. He was trying to draw ether from nearby and accidentally drew some out of your soul crystal. He promises to give it back, but first he wants to use it for a bit. The Warrior of Light isn't sure, and Sid just wants to stab the kid so you can get your ether back, but Riel is curious to find out who exactly he wants to help. He doesn't have a specific person in mind. The world is so full of sadness that if he can help anyone, that will make at least a small difference. Since he seems to be honest, Riel wants to help him find someone to help. But Sid, being the voice of reason, thinks helping the weird kid with the unknown power who stole your soul crystal's ether will probably cause you to have a bad day. But since it's your soul crystal, he leaves the decision up to you. And being the idiot that you are, you decide to help the boy as long as he agrees to fix your crystal once he's done. He promises that he will, so you all split up to find someone in need. You come across a woman named Millie who's having an argument with a carpenter who won't have his crew do any more work until they're paid, despite the woman's claims that the money is coming. It doesn't help that with the new regime in Ishgard, having a statue restored for a woman who is related to a former member of the Heavens Ward is not a priority. While she doesn't know if her cousin was really a part of all the terrible things the Archbishop did, she does know that he had wanted the statue of Saint Valoroyant, a former Azure Dragoon who had forced Nidhogg back generations ago, restored after Dravanians destroyed it. It was his personal mission to have it repaired, but since his death, people don't want to get involved with the project. Since he was family, Millie plans on completing it for him, but without money, it's looking impossible, and now she doesn't know what to do. Not sure whether Mist's power can help her or not, since you don't even know what they do, you find him and let him know about the woman. He thinks he can help her, so you take him to her just so you can see what he can do. The first thing he asks her is if she wants to see her cousin again, which who wouldn't want to see a lost loved one again if someone offered, so Mist tells her to think of how he looked and sounded, then head off to a secluded spot and wait. To me, this sounds like a recipe for ending up with your photo on the back of a milk carton, but since she's curious, Millie agrees to wait for Mist in a secluded garden near the tribunal that both she and her cousin enjoyed. He sent you with her, while he goes to get Sid and Riel so you all can see what he can do. When Mist shows up to the meeting spot, Millie is shocked to see that not only did he walk up with Sid and Riel, but her cousin as well. And since you killed him, he's a man that you know to be very, very dead. But he talks, acts, and even sounds very much alive. He comforts his cousin, however being a member of the Heavens Ward makes the city a little bit unsafe for him, and Millie wants you to help him get out of the city. Sid agrees to help, but he wants you to meet him at Falcon's Nest because he has a lot that he wants to talk to you about. Mist warns that the further you get Ignace away from Millie, the weaker he'll get, so you need to be quick. You fully understand what he means when you see a swirling pool of dark ether replace the night. Mist lets you know that he can give memories form, but after a while the magic fades. Think of Amarat and the creature's image self-recreated in the ancient city, and you have an idea of what the boy is doing, but on a much, much smaller scale. What Emmett did seems to be permanent. Mist's memory clones are not. Once the spell is undone, the summoned memory turns back into ether, and since it's your ether, you reabsorb it. Now that you have your ether back, Sid snaps at Mist for doing something as stupid as summoning a member of the Heavens Ward in the middle of Ishgard. He could have gotten you all killed. And to make matters worse, the ether you absorbed wasn't all of what Mist took from you, so your soul crystal is still broken. He apologizes for lying, but he promises that if you help him 4 more times, you'll have all of your ether back. The minute this kid moved the goalpost, I probably would have stabbed him and taken my ether like that, especially since he wants me to find the people for him to help, then use my ether to do it. Sid chastises him for his half-baked attempts at being a hero, but Mist swears that's not what he's trying to do. He just wants to give some peace to all of those people whose lives have been shattered by tragedy. And since he does have the Warrior of Light's ether, she can't really let him out of her sight, so you have to tag along with him for at least a little while. Knowing that you'll help him makes him feel better, and Riel assures him that even though Sid acts like a jerk, he's gonna stick around too. Which is true, but Sid didn't want Riel ruining his tough guy image. Since you've made your decision, you all head back to Falcon's Nest to figure out what you're going to do next, while Sid complains about the fact that he's more of a babysitter now than a Dark Knight, a job that is driving him insane. Riel tries to find out more about the mysterious Mist, but he won't say anything about himself, and he doesn't seem to like anything other than conjuring people's memories, something that Sid has no idea how he does, and since he can't figure out how the boy is doing it, he can't think of a way to take back your ether other than completing the boy's task. Since there's no choice other than to get it done, you head out to Tailfeather to see if you can find someone who needs help there. While the hunters in the area haven't experienced any real tragedies of their own, a prisoner named Ul'dah has been brought to the area to atone for her crimes by doing hard labor, but the man in charge of her is extremely brutal, beating the woman constantly, and having dealt with Ishgardian justice before, what's happening to her may not be justified, so you all go to see for yourselves. It's not hard to find the woman, you just follow the sounds of a man yelling. The fact that the woman is on her knees groveling and begging for forgiveness as the man screams at her makes it all the worse. But you do recognize the woman, and had it not been for Emmerich's intervention, she would have been put to death for what she did. Seeing the way that the proctor treats her makes Sid want to kill him, until you let him know that the woman was the one who drugged you and led the protest that nearly led to the end of the peace with the Dravanians. However, the fact that you never took revenge on her for what she did to you makes what the proctor is doing seems even worse. The only reason she was against the treaty was because her husband had died fighting the Dravanians, and Mist wonders if letting her see her husband again will help her, but Sid thinks doing that will hurt the woman more. Even so, he's adamant about doing it anyway, so Sid agrees to help. However, he won't have the boy summoning spirits in the middle of a crowd. He sends Riel and Mist into the woods while he frees the woman, since if you walk up to her with a giant sword, she might think you're there to kill her. The proctor is your target. If he's a good man, then give him a chance to ask for forgiveness for the way he treated his prisoner. If not, well, that's what the big sword is for. He is not sorry for what he did, so you bury him for his crimes and track down the others in time to see Ul'dah talking to the recreation of her husband. While she does talk to him, she knows that's not her husband and asks you to banish the thing. When she realizes that it was Mist that summoned it, she thanks him for what he tried to do and apologizes to you because she hated you for the simple reason that you fought the dragons and lived when her husband didn't. She heard stories of dark nights when she was little, and she wants you to keep fighting for people like her, but she doesn't want you to miss the time with your friends and family in between. To honor her husband, she decides to make the most of the freedom you gave her and leaves, letting you reclaim your ether. Mist feels terrible about the fact that he couldn't help her, but Sid tries to cheer him up by reminding him that he does have 3 more chances to get it right, so he should stop whining and try again somewhere else. And while the vision of her husband didn't make her feel better, what you said to her did. Despite this, Mist is scared of failing again, so Sid comes up with an idea that you never expect to hear from him. He wants to take Mist to the Mughals, since they helped him and Riel when they weren't on the best of terms. Even though they're extremely annoying, Sid promises to refrain from ripping their palms off of their heads and making them eat them, and Mist is seemingly enjoying the sights. The place is almost pretty enough to make him forget the troubles of the world. Almost. But there's so much pain in the world and so much has been lost that even looking at the floating islands doesn't stop his guilt over not being able to help more people, and it's making him very bitter toward the world in general, something he's entirely too young to be. Apparently being alone with his thoughts wasn't helping to ease his conscience at all, so he decides to head back to Sid and Riel and continue his mission. Of course, that makes Sid happy because he can get away from the Mughals, but Riel wants to show Mist around. The two of them run off before Sid can stop them. The two of you chase after the kids, only to have some Mughals make the mistake of sneaking up on Sid, who beats them all unconscious for making him lose sight of the children. The two of you split up, and you find them standing near the area where the Mughals had pretended to kidnap Riel and made the two of you beat them up a while back. Riel's in the process of telling Mist the story of how the Mughals sang to try and show Sid how he hadn't fully understood what his master was telling him to do on his path as a Dark Knight. She even tells him about how Sid lost his family and was raised by his master alongside Fray, who died on him too. Sid was an angry guy back then, and while Riel tries to say that he's gotten better, his desire to murder the Mughals and curse proves that not so much. Since his master was so dear to him, when Sid arrives, Mist offers to summon the man for him. Sid thinks about it, then calls Mist a not so nice name before ordering him not to do it. He does it anyway, and Sid's master appears. He greets both you and Sid, and praises you for going so far as a Dark Knight on your own before you even met Sid, and he's proud of you both for bringing honor to the name of the Dark Knights, just like he had. He had once been a temple knight fighting Dravanians and leading men to their deaths again and again until the faces of his fallen allies all blended together. When the people became nothing more than bodies for him to throw at his enemies, he had left the knights. It's a story Sid already knew, but what he didn't know was why his master had decided to become a Dark Knight and take on 2 children. It's a question Sid had asked before, and one that his master said he would understand when he was older and stronger. And since he asked the question again, his master decides to test him to see if he's strong enough to hear the answer. The master is no slouch, and he challenges you, Sid, and Riel all at once. Memory or not, the man is strong, but the 3 of you bring him down, despite the fact that Sid took some serious wounds during the battle. However, the fact that he took the wounds to protect the 2 of you earns him some praise and the answer that he sought. The reason his master had taken on 2 kids was to leave behind a legacy that meant something. He had helped people to make up for the deaths he had caused, but training a new generation of protectors was a much better way to help fix the world, and he would train the new generation to be better than he was. With that, he prepares to fade away, but not before giving you a few words of wisdom. People who fight for others will never know peace. Every choice you make brings death for someone, be it one of your enemies, a friend, or even yourself. That isn't something you can avoid, you just have to learn to live with it. Lastly, he tells Sid to be a little nicer to Riel and a little less of a jerk in general. Then he's gone, and you retrieve more of your ether. While Sid is upset that Mist didn't listen to him, he wants the boy to use this as a learning experience. Memories can be painful, and summoning them without someone's consent could be bad. However, he's grateful for getting the chance to see his master and fight him again, but his injuries are serious, so Riel takes him back to Mogholm. Seeing Sid actually heal emotionally after seeing his master makes Mist believe that there may be a little hope after all. However, I doubt his emotional healing will last, since he's too weak to travel and has to stay with the Mughals. He even asks you to punch one of them for him just to make him feel better, something that I have no problem with doing because the Mughals are annoying. While Sid recovers, you and Mist continue your mission of helping random people, something the Warrior of Light should be very skilled at by now. This time he wants to find some people who have been hurt by war, so you head to Garabania, a place that has known a lot of battles. There you find a soldier who you had met forever ago in Quarry Mill. He needed some medicine and Mefred had ordered you to get some for him. Instead of taking it all himself, Galleon had given some to a friend who needed it. His friend made a full recovery. Galleon didn't. Unfortunately, his friend ended up working with the Griffin and dying at Belsar's Wall, a story I'll cover when I do a recap of Heavensward. Despite his illness, Galleon outlived all of his friends, but now his disease has nearly claimed him and he's just sitting around waiting to die. Mist doesn't want to let a man who was willing to sacrifice his own life for a friend die so miserably alone, so he decides to summon Galleon's friend. The summoning works, and hearing his friend's voice, Galleon asks him to offer up a prayer for his fallen friends at the Reach, a request that Hodard is more than willing to honor. However, halfway there he shatters and returns to ether. A man's memories can't outlive him, and it seems that Galleon died before his memory could complete the task. Mist doesn't take this well, and although he says he's going to head back to Ishgard, when you get to the Forgotten Night, Sid and Riel haven't seen him, meaning you're going to have to track him down to get the last of your ether back. Since the last place you saw him was in Raga's Reach, you, Riel, and Sid head back there to search for your ether thief. One of the Resistance members had saw Mist wandering around saying "forgive me" over and over before running off, leaving behind a lot of dead chocobos that seem to have had their life force sucked out. When you tell Sid what you found out, he lets you know that a boy matching Mist's description had been seen leaving the Reach and heading toward the peaks, so that's your next destination. You pass more dead beasts that have no injuries on them, just like the chocobos in the Reach, which is strange since up until now Mist had only had one ability, and he couldn't fight at all, unless he was hiding other powers. And considering how he stole your ether when you first met, an ability he hadn't used since, there's no telling what else the boy was hiding. But Sid plans on finding out once you catch him, so the 3 of you split up to search faster. Sid and Riel track him down first and call out for you, but by the time you arrive, Riel is unconscious and Sid is down. Mist had attacked them, and whatever he had been drawing out of the creatures had made him a lot stronger. Not to mention the fact that the memory he decided to summon was Riel's crazy mother. Still not knowing what the boy plans, you demand that he explain himself, but instead he says that you are just as much the cause of what he's doing as he is because of all the people you have killed and the lives you've ruined. Your body count is enormous, and the excuse you use, calling what you do justice, doesn't change the fact that you're a murderer. And while you aren't blameless, the entire world filled with cruelty and hate has made murderers out of so many people. But Mist has finally come up with a solution. Instead of trying to heal people one at a time, he's going to make the world a place free of death, where whenever someone falls, the will of their loved ones will summon them back as one of his illusions. But to do that, he'll have to consume massive amounts of ether to fill the world with his illusions, a plan that Sid thinks is insane despite the fact that he agrees that the world is a cruel place. Regardless, he won't stand by and let Mist force his illusions on people just to make himself feel better, and neither will you. Realizing that you can't accept what needs to be done, Mist sends countless visions of people you have killed after you, taking note of how you seem to slaughter everyone who stands in your way, yet you still lose everything you tried to protect in the process, leaving behind nothing but the pain of your loss and failures. Finally getting tired of this little game, the Warrior of Light closes her eyes and summons the one person who had said the things that she had always wanted to say but didn't, her darker half, in the form of Fray. While yes, you do have a lot of sins, there aren't very many things that you truly regret. Fray tells Mist that a house divided cannot stand, and it's time for this pity party to end. Seeing his friend appear causes Sid to rightfully wonder what's going on, and in truth I think he is speaking for a lot of the audience, but that explanation will come soon. First, Sid tosses his sword to Fray as Mist summons more of your fallen foes for you to face, telling you that no matter how hard you fight, the day for you to pay for all of your sins will come. Something Fray says that he will welcome with open arms when it does, but that day's not today. Together, the two of you bring down the apparitions, and Mist breaks down, begging for forgiveness, something Fray tells him that he shouldn't seek. You should carry the burdens of your deeds. It's part of what's owed to those who've died. And the people who have fallen deserve to live on, but only in your hearts and memories. Saying goodbye is always painful, but it is something that has to be done, which is why you have to enjoy the time you have with those you care about, because no matter how many regrets you have, you can't get that time back. The only person that you should seek forgiveness from is yourself. And with those words, both Fray and Mist vanish, returning to where they belong, inside of you. Now for some, this story may be a bit confusing, so here's a brief explanation. Just like the manifestation of Fray was the Warrior of Light's darker half, the desire to say and do things that may have been frowned upon by others, Mist was the manifestation of your regrets, the guilt over the loss of so many friends and allies, and also your victims. The story was about the Warrior of Light's internal struggle with forgiving herself for all the things she's done and failed to do. That struggle just took place on the outside for everyone else to see. After facing down Sin Eaters and Light Wardens on the first, the Warrior of Light heads back to Ishgard just to make sure Sidu and Riel haven't gotten themselves into any trouble. Ironically enough, Sid has a letter for you, but before he gives it to you, he wants to hear a bit about what you and the Scions have been getting into. The minute you start to mention other worlds and stuff, Sid is totally lost. To be fair, it is all pretty confusing, so he gets you to break it down for him, a lot like what I do on this channel. While the story is incredible, it doesn't really surprise him. He knew you were special in the first place. You had to be to become a Dark Knight, so nothing you accomplish will ever be unbelievable to him. The part of the story that interested him the most was Thancred and how he had to look after the reincarnation of his surrogate daughter. It's something he can relate to since he's doing the same thing for Riel. Hearing that he thinks of her as his daughter makes Riel extremely upset, and she storms off after calling him a very colorful version of a chocobo's backside. Sid doesn't know why they made her so mad, but it's obvious that she has a crush on him. I wonder just how old Riel actually is. Because of the way Ellison grows, she might actually be about 20 years old. They basically hit puberty twice, and the second time they grow like 3 feet and start to actually look like adults. Imagine being in college and still looking like a middle schooler. I guess that would be kind of frustrating. Sid decides to take this moment to give you the letter he had mentioned. It was delivered by a woman named Looney, but she wasn't the one who wrote it. If you want to know more, he tells you to go and find her because he has an angry girl to deal with. The letter is a very vague yet detailed thank you note, meaning it says a lot while saying absolutely nothing, leaving you with no clue who wrote it, so you go and see Looney to see if she knows more. She turns out to be the woman you saved from the Temple Knights when you first became a Dark Knight. She still remembers all the violent threats you made while scaring off all of the Knights, and it makes her smile. I personally think it was the giant sword you were swinging around that caused them to run off, but the threats were an added bonus that apparently made the Knights decide to never bother the woman again. While her life is great because of you, she wasn't the one who wrote the letter. A knight named Patronat had given it to her so she could give it to the hero of the Scions. He's at the congregation if you want to find out where he got the letter from. He didn't write it either. Orella of Rhalgr's Reach gave it to him. He had spent some time there after the Battle of Gimlet Dark, and if you had to guess, whoever sent the letter to the Reach had heard of the fight between you and Xenos, and how you'd been brought to the Reach afterwards. But by the time the letter got there, you had already been moved to Ishgard. Looney had recognized your description, which is why he'd given the letter to her. He figured she'd see you before he did, and he was right. However, if you want to know more about the letter, you should ask Orella. That's a lot of traveling to find out who wrote a simple letter, but you're invested now, so you head to the Reach. Orella tells you that the letter came with some supplies from Little Alamigo. She thinks the sender thought that if Lise would have seen the letter, she would have given it to you. But Lise didn't even notice it, considering the fact that she was fighting a war at the time. This thing is getting a little ridiculous, but since you've gone this far, you head to Little Alamigo to hopefully find out who sent the letter. Gundobald, a man who you've known since the early days of your adventuring, had agreed to send the letter because of how heartfelt it was. But since it's clearly bothering you to know who wrote the thing, he sends you to speak to a man named Godherd to get the answers. Godherd is someone else you've met before. He's the merchant who was angry at you for bringing his goods back covered in blood. He'd even tried to make you pay for the damages. After that day, he had made a lot of bad decisions that left him in debt to some people who took almost everything he had. When he had time to think, he realized just how wrong he had been to act like he had with you after you had helped him for free. He had decided to start a new life. He took some plants and became an apprentice to some botanists where he's proven himself to be quite good at the work. He just wanted to tell you how you changed his life and to thank you. As a gift, he gives you one of his flowers, even though it's primarily used at funerals. And that makes you think back to Fray and how he was never given a proper send-off. So you decide to head to Kurthus, the place where you talk to Fray the most, and wait for him to appear. Your darker half manifests after you leave the flower as an offering. In the beginning, you needed a voice to say all of the things that you couldn't, but now, having come to terms with the complex person that you are, the Warrior of Light no longer defines herself by how other people see her. She no longer has to hide her anger and frustration or fears or grief for fear of how it'll affect those around her. What this little journey has done, it's shown her that there's no need to fear the darkness within herself, because even that has the power to change someone's life for the better. This concludes the story of the Dark Knight, at least for now. If you enjoyed this video and my other content, hit the like button and subscribe. And if you really want to support me, become a member of the channel and buy me a coffee once a month. Until next time, guys, later.